Hey everyone, welcome back to our next council checkup. We've got Annie back, and it's been a hot week with week. It's been a hot month with the Illuvitars
Yes.
taking up all of the last month. I'm going to jump right into it. Annie, how do you think the sale went off? Obviously, we're still in the midst of the sale, but how do you feel about the launch?
Yeah, as a council member this epoch, I have to say the Illuvitar sale was very gratifying for me because it was our first, let's say, real kind of product launch during this epoch. I know we obviously have launched, Illuvium Zero, and as I was coming in, we had the Overworld that was coming out also. But as far as like actual customer facing products, this is the first big one, and so that on its own was just super exciting for me. As far as the overall results, I would say that Illuvitars have been very solid. Um, I don't think it was a grand slam. So, for instance, if you go back and look at the land sale last year, I don't think that we had that level of success. But I think very solid in terms of delivery. If you look at the artwork, the collectibles, the album framework, all of those structures that the team has put a lot of time into, you can see it, you can feel it. I was actually just about an hour ago in one of the Discord groups, not in the Illuvium server, but in another one, and people were super excited about going out and saying, "Well, maybe I'll jump in a little bit more to Illuvitars now that we've seen some of the community rewards that are going on," and so I think there's a lot of engagement, certainly within our community, but also a lot of others. Um, there were some challenges, as we know, on the tech side on the front end. Thankfully, the team was able to get those resolved pretty quickly, and I think there were opportunities for us to improve in some of the alpha discussions. But by and large, I'm pretty pleased with the way things have shaken out. Definitely, definitely positive overall.
I'm gonna take the chance to ask you the question. I know a kind of a pain point to me in retrospect because in the midst of the sale and the launch, those first 24 hours, it was really exciting. And man, opening discs so addicting.
It is. I agree.
Anyways, but I feel like one thing in particular that could have been better is we had that alpha sale for 3 days.
hmm
I was like supposed to be 3 days or until sellout. And it kind of felt like the whole marketing and events kind of centered around alpha, and then there was this pocket of people who were waiting, for those 3 days to be over so that they
hmm
could participate at the price point that they wanted to participate. Has there been any discussion, behind the scenes about how we might better incorporate both groups in the marketing and future waves?
Yeah, there has. This is an area that there was a lot of discussion on the front end too. Um, let me just say that I think that within the council there was a little bit of a split on preferences for it. Um, but as we went through the discussion from the dev standpoint, it was going to be a lot more difficult to actually set it up
Mm,
to either run concurrently. Obviously, we could have changed the duration on the front end. I think the initial proposal was 7 days or 5 days,
yeah.
and I pushed pretty strongly to make sure that we lowered it. I would have liked to see it just be 2 days, but again, that was just my own personal preference. I don't think 3 days was bad, but I also agree with you. We basically kind of hit a lull, towards the end, and everyone was just kind of waiting for it to wrap up. I think either running both concurrently, alphas and non-alphas at the same time, or having a very short window, 24 hours or maybe 36 hours, uh, gives you that same momentum that you could then carry over to the non-alpha sales. So I agree, and I think this is one of the areas that we're learning about.
Yeah, and I mean, as we've had that sale and we're seeing how people are interacting with wave 1, have there already kind of been the start to discussions for wave 2? Do we know, like in the past, there was conversations about there'd kind of be a never-ending sale of Illuvitars, but then I think in a Discord chat, I more recently heard that there is the possibility that at the end of this wave, we're going to take a short break before wave 2. Is that a discussion that you guys have had?
It is. We gosh, about 2 or 3 weeks ago now had a pretty intense discussion about what do we see as far as future wave timing. How many should we be targeting for the remainder of 2023? what's that look like before you have the other games out, and it's basically just the Illuvitars that are kind of fully, you know, open in the public, in perpetuity. So lots of dialogues about it. I don't think that we have a final plan set in stone right now. We're wanting to see how does this wave go as we get closer to the end. Obviously, we will need to make decisions on wave two
Mhm.
timing before this epoch would end. So we will, of course, be taking all that information and analytics that we've got. Um, I would be pretty comfortable saying that we would have a wave two that would start relatively soon after wave one is ending. There may be some technical changes. Obviously, you know, you've got the additional artwork and things that you'll roll in, but generally speaking, I would expect to see a wave two soon after. The question then would become, though, how long would you allow, you know, wave two to run? Do you have that be a longer time period or a shorter time period? You know, what's your thought as far as a wave three? If we're looking at that, you know,
Oh,
before
no.
gameplay is out for the other titles, I mean, that's kind of the decision that, you know, the next epoch is going to be faced with.
And then, is there anything you can tell us in terms of partner discs? Because you always hear like, "Oh, we're gonna partner with these people." Kieran's dropped partner discs, and I don't know if that's something like if you can tell us, like, is that something we can expect, like, 3 to 6 months? Is it further out?
So I'm gonna be careful here, making sure that I don't leak anything that I'm not supposed to. So as Kieran has mentioned, partner discs and partnerships with Illuvium are a really important part of our model, right? We want to
Mhm,
have other solid projects that have their community members here that we're sharing with each other. This is an important part of the ethos of Illuvium is this idea of interoperability. We're building it into our core game titles, but by the same token, we have the chance to be able to share with others our IP, and they can then participate in a product like Illuvitars. So I would definitely expect that you'll see some announcements for specific partnerships that have been confirmed in the, you know, at least midterm, and those are going to be not running during this current wave, but at some point after that, we'll definitely see some partnerships emerge, and I'm really excited because I think those communities are going to be super pumped to be able to have their own IP included in the Illuvium landscape. Obviously,
mhm.
Illuvium has a tremendous amount of cachet, credibility, things like the artwork, the collectability is just amazing. And so, yeah, I think a lot of projects are excited when they are able to ink that deal with Illuvium to become an official partner.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, like, I'm a bit of a purist when it comes to the Illuvtar disc in the sense of, like, I don't wanna bond anything. Like,
Yeah.
I've bonded tier zeros because they're gonna be in every wave, and
Hmm.
I've bonded, lynxes, but I can't bring myself to bond those higher tiered stuff just because I value it so much, so
Hmm.
it's like, when I think about what partner discs might be, right, part of me is more just like, "Okay, well, if it's a variation on a Rampire, a variation on an Illuvitar, like, maybe with something in the portrait background or something else," I'm like, "Okay, well, that's great, I can collect that, and it stays pure." But I'm like, if it's an accessory, the collector in me wants to keep collecting it, but I'm like, "Ah, I wouldn't bond it to anything, would I?"
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I'm with you too. God, I've got a few accessories that I really love, and I picked up, and I'm like, I just haven't been able to pull the trigger to actually bond them yet either. Um, so my two favorite in my collection, I've got a Hollow Lynx. Actually, the that particular version of the Lynx is my absolute favorite. I think in the entire collection. I know it's not the most rare, it's not the strongest power, but just from a visual standpoint, definitely my favorite. And I haven't been able to bond anything to it. It's just so clean without it. And then I've got an empowered dash that also like I want to click the button on one of the spy glasses, but I haven't been able to do so then either. So
oh,
I'm
that would
gonna
look nice.
eventually I'm just gonna have a YOLO moment and go ahead and do it with at least one of them, but we'll see. I think the moral of the story is I just need to open more packs so that some of them I'm comfortable bonding and just go with that.
Yeah, that is the way, always one more pack, just
Yeah,
one more.
exactly.
I said that with the, alpha discs, I bought way too many.
Mm,
It was bad. Like, had my amount, and I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna save this half for wave 1 and this half for wave 2," and next thing you know, it's all gone.
mhm.
But I said just one more mega alpha, and then I opened a Rampfire.
Oh. And then it was more than one more, I'm sure.
Well, at least for alphas, that was it, 'cause my money was out until I, like,
Okay.
resold stuff, and then alpha was
Sure.
over, and I can't
Okay.
bring myself to buy it
Yeah,
off the
the secondary
secondary,
market. Sure.
but anyways, it was a tremendous I wish I would've caught it on camera one
Mhm.
more moment. Don't
Yes.
take me as an example, people.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to do the same. Every time I actually unbox something, I'm always trying to record it just in case I have one of those legendary moments as well. I haven't yet, but at some point I'm sure I will.
Circling back real fast to the sale, one of the big changes that happened was that IIP that passed so that the funds from the Illuvitar sale went into a safety net. I don't know if you know the numbers offhand, but do you have an idea of about how much so far has been funneled into that safety net where we're sitting?
Yeah, so I don't have the exact number, but ballpark, we had about 3 million in SILV2 that was burned, and then about 2 million
Wow.
in the ETH payments since we launched. We're sitting here; it's the very tail end of March. So again, not an exact figure, but at a high level, I think very good in terms of the results for the project. We've also seen, people are very interested, right? There's a lot of value in terms of secondary market, secondary sales that we've seen, and overall, I it could have gone better if we were in like a raging bull market and everyone was
Yeah.
just like chucking money in. But frankly, to have a super successful sale where not only did people participate, but by and large people are happy they participated afterwards, that's almost more important for me than just having the money. Because again,
Mhm.
you can get money, but you can't get back community sentiment. If people come back and they feel like, you know what, I have all the regrets because I actually participated in this, that can be a death knell for a
Yeah.
project. But again, to have so many people that they're loving playing, they're loving collecting, the price point is so accessible, right? $7-8, is definitely something that most people are comfortable with. Again, not financial advice, as everyone watching knows. I'm not encouraging you to spend money, especially money that you don't have. But for most of us, that's an amount that we're very comfortable spending on day to day things, and we're willing to forego if it's something that we enjoy.
Yeah, and I saw a little bit of confusion in the Discord, so I was hoping you could iron out some details for us. Is it just the sale from the discs that go into the safety pool, or is it the fee from secondary sales as well?
Yeah, so it would be both. So
Okay.
we're as a project, the revenue from the Illuvitars, and this would include the primary sales, secondary sales, and then additionally, if we have additional income, for instance, from a partnership agreement, those would be going into the safety pool until we hit that mark where we're comfortable. We've got plenty of runway for the team to continue building out the other titles. So yeah, you can basically add all of that up.
Awesome. And ever since you have alphas, you have regular, a lot of people in Discord were talking about how they thought that like, oh, the alphas aren't distinguished enough. If these are going to be the first edition things that we're collecting, they've been saying that they want more of a distinguished look, easier to tell the difference. So much so that there's an IP being discussed currently around that. What's your opinion on that? Do you think it needs to be more distinguished, more obvious that they're alphas?
Yeah, so I see both sides of it, and honestly, like I don't think there's any problem with the community, and also as a holder of a number of alphas, I've got two. I've been really good with my alphas. I'll just say I've got two opened and I've got eight unopened at the moment. So
Oh,
my
nice.
willpower is strong. But for sure, I think there's value if there's a visual identifier for it. Um, the big challenge is what should that be? Because I'm
Mhm.
very much a proponent. The artwork, the lore, the environment, the experience that you're curating in a game, and whether it's a collectibles game like this or it's the overworld or the arena, you really want to be careful not to mess with that too much. And it's always dangerous to try and make changes like that by committee. And so, what I've been really pleased with in this particular IAP is the community said, "Hey, we have a request. We want it to be, as you said, more distinguished and more visible. What can that look like?" And I think maybe the initial discussion wasn't so open to the dialogue. But as you had some of the team members jump in and start giving ideas and say, what about X? I'm concerned about Y, maybe messing up the visuals and artwork for some of the Illuvitars. There's problems with some of the accessories. If we were to put something in this part of the portrait, all of those are points that, from a general community perspective, we're not going to be thinking about. But when you engage the community and you have an engaged team on the back end, this shows the strength of the Web3 model. Because again, if you were I hate to say, but in a Web2 gaming environment, they just launched it and said, this is it, like we're done,
Mhm.
we're on to the next project. But again, the community is saying this is important to us, and what options do we have? And there's that compromise, that give and take between everyone. The community also doesn't want the team to have to spend a year's worth of
Yeah.
development time figuring something out. So we're all aligned that if there's a good way that we can make this a clean visual improvement, we should definitely go for it. And I'm excited to see what the team's going to come back with. I've seen some of the good ideas that are visible in the ideas channel and in the IAP section. So I'm comfortable we'll find something that's a good position the community is going to appreciate.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited because just like we're about 10 minutes away right now from the weekly showcase.
Mm.
And maybe an hour ago, I saw, I think it was either Grant or Andrew or Illuvium that kind of gave us a preview. And it was
Oh,
like a
I
little
missed it. Okay.
2 to 5 second
Yeah.
clip where it was showing like, and I don't know if this is what they're going for or just maybe a suggestion that's being, put together to present to the community. Cause with the IIP, I assume it'd be something that's voted on.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it was cool, like,
Mm.
I'll clip it in here so people can see, but it was nice
Okay.
because it was
Awesome.
subtle without being, like, too in your face. Because that was my fear, like,
Agreed.
I'm forever comparing it to Pokemon because, this is, like, my adult version, like, it's nostalgia, it's everything that I wanted Pokemon to grow into, and so on the cards I collected, I mean, it's just a little first edition number in the corner, which I think Illuvium did a really good job with their alpha symbol.
Mhm.
So, personally, I didn't think there was much need, but I think Grant really struck a nice happy medium or whoever designed it. I'm not actually
Mhm.
sure who yet. Have to go watch that showcase after this.
Absolutely.
Honestly, my other big question, which I mean, we don't have a plan, so we probably don't have the information, is more how it's going to be implemented, whether or not it's just like a UI layover.
Mm.
Um, or do you have any ideas of like do you think the marketing team will make an effort to announce this more widely to the community? Because there are plenty of people who maybe don't watch the showcases, aren't
Mm.
in the Discord, where this kind of might go unnoticed to them.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think in this case, this is a situation where building it in our user experiences, right? Our curated Illuvidex, this is the most important element.
Mhm.
I'm less interested in making sure that on any additional marketplace or, viewer for the actual NFT, that this is always going to appear. Um Again, when you look at like people that are actually trading for them, uh, folks that are new to the community are not necessarily going to know the metadata, but the individuals that are actually out there buying and selling
Mhm.
these alphas, they're going to know, and they're going to know, all right, I need to set the flag for it. And if I'm not on the Illuvidex, people are going to be going through the metadata to make sure that they're getting what they want. And if this is advice to people. If you don't know what you're purchasing when you're in the NFT space, that's something that you should fix, right? So we can call that financial advice. Don't buy anything if you have no idea what it is. That's, I think, just general good life advice as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, but I think in terms of the visibility, I would expect as long as it's covered on the Illuvium curated sites, then that's sufficient, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's honestly, the Illuvitars have really just been blowing up, and I love that there's been continued, just engagement throughout the team and the community on Discord and Twitter and YouTubes, and we got those celebrity disc battles going that is really fun to watch just because you kinda get that secondhand endorphin rush from watching the cards get flipped over and see,
Mhm.
he has to get this, power to beat so and so.
Yeah.
But when that all started, there was a bit of controversy in the sense that Kieran wanted to battle, excuse me if I say this wrong, Shuzu.
Hmm.
Now, real quick before we jump into everything that unfolded with that, do you mind giving everyone a bit of back information in case they don't know who Shuzu is?
Yeah, so he was one of the co-founders of Three Arrows Capital, which isn't going to mean that much if you're not probably super heavily involved in Web three. Um, but but basically, this was an organization, uh, very famous pair of traders, and he and Kyle were the two co-founders. Um, they were sort of on top of the world, let's say, for a number of years. I think Three Arrows was like top three in terms of trading activity for the for the overall fund. And at some point, I'm going to get the timing wrong, but it was early in 2022. Um, they basically went completely insolvent, and it came out that there was, at a minimum, terrible risk management practices that they had been operating under. Um,
Mhm.
and potentially more, right? So allegedly, there's potential fraud that was involved. I have no idea if that's true or not. That's the type of thing that's going to be identified in a court at some point in time. As a result of basically the fund falling apart, um, Suzu and Kyle, his co-founder, basically went underground. And so, as far as I know, at the moment, they are still wanted. And are in locations that are not supporting extradition to the jurisdictions that they're wanted in. And so, um, interestingly enough, they also have come back to now prepare for an additional capital raise for another project that they're going to be
Mm.
launching. So, um, can't shake your head enough sometimes at Web three, um, but uh, they they're at a minimum highly controversial figures, let's say, and in general, I think the average person in Web three has a very negative opinion of Suzu and Kyle both, from the activities in 2022.
Yeah, so I mean, and the whole thing surrounding this for us is that Karen wanted to kick off the celebrity disc battles with that controversial figure. Honestly, when I first heard about it, I just thought this was something that Kieran was doing on his own. I didn't really connect it with I mean, obviously, Illuvitars, it's Illuvium. Kieran's the co-founder. But I was surprised really when I saw an IIP go through to stop this from happening. And in the back of my head, I was like, wait, can you do that? Because Kieran is, I mean, for better or worse, is his own person. Can you kind of walk us through the decision making process within the council? I didn't really read up on it in Discord myself, so I'd
Mhm.
love to hear your take on it.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So there, this is a very let's say a very involved topic. Um, One premise that I want to put out on the front end is this difference in organizational and role responsibility and sort of personal discretion. Um, the point at which the council said it's appropriate for us to get involved is when we have anything that's clearly an official medium of communication from Illuvium that would be communicating, marketing, sponsoring the event. And so, for us, there was a pretty clear line. As soon as we go out and we say we're using the official Twitter account, we're putting something out on the website, we're putting something out on via an email communication, whatever that might be. Once it goes out from Illuvium, it's now not a personal decision, right? It's an
Mm.
organizational decision that has been undertaken, and as such, then it falls to us as a DAO overall to make sure that we have the responsibility for it. The other element from the org standpoint that's a little bit interesting is, does this fall in under marketing, or does it fall under a sort of brand image and risk mitigation standpoint, right? And that's
Mhm.
actually where more of the discussion, and I think where more of the questions within the council arose. So as myself and the rest of the council, including Kieran, we were engaged in active dialogue once the plan was announced. um, we said, look, we as a council, not necessarily this epoch, but in former epochs, have already delegated the marketing responsibilities to Illuvium Labs. And
Mhm.
so we don't want to now say, well, you're doing it wrong, we want to grab it back. The stance that we took though is this isn't just marketing. This is also sort of a partnership brand reputational topic that we're choosing to associate ourselves with this figure. And as a result of that, we believe this is not in the DAO's best interest, right? It certainly will generate more views on the topic,
Mhm.
but most of those are not in a positive light. And so
True.
that's that's sort of how we got to the position and said we think it makes sense for us to step in as a council. And we had the dialogue directly with Kieran. He said, and I think those that followed it probably saw his stance was, look, if the council says they believe this is a bad idea, I won't do it. Absolutely, I'll abide by that decision. Which again, I think for me is a strong point that Kieran is willing to do more than just pay lip service to DAO governance. Whether it's a spider IAP and he's got arachnophobia just like I do, we're still going to follow the community sentiments and go forward. Or even in something that's a personal preference that he thought, good, this is still going to give us a high level of marketing value. But if the council thinks it's more negative than positive, we'll step back and not do so. So that's from an organizational standpoint, that's why was the council involved and sort of what was our take on the overall position. um, in terms of the kind of personal side, because I think there's also an interesting aspect here. Kieran, as the CEO of Illuvium Labs, is of course a public figure.
Mhm.
He, as a CEO, is always representing his organization, whether he wants to be or not. And certainly when he's engaging in using an Illuvium product, that always is going to carry kind of the imprimatur, the weight of this is one of the co-founders and the
Mhm.
CEO behind it. So in the case that it wasn't something that we would have said we're not using any Illuvium resources for, it's totally just a personal decision on his front. In that case, we wouldn't have stepped in as a council. There's nothing to stop. He's acting on his own as an individual member of the DAO. What I would have done though, and I have done this on multiple occasions, Kieran will tell you, there's been probably 3 or 4 different times over the last year and a half, even well before I was a council member, that I've reached out to him and said, "Hey, I think this particular approach that you're taking isn't the best one for you and for the DAO personally. I mean, I'm not in a position to vote to stop it, but I can just give you my feedback." And I think one of the points that I really like with Kieran is he's receptive to that. He has a very
Okay.
clear vision on the what's in the best interest of Illuvium. He knows that I have the same and that I want it to be successful, and he'll listen, right? So we don't always agree on everything, and that's totally okay. But I at least am able to give him a different perspective on things, and then he can weigh that and make a final call at the end if it's really something that he wants to change or not. So that would have been my take if it was just sort of Kieran Warwick battling Suzu, as opposed to Kieran, the CEO of Illuvium Labs, battling in the Illuvitar launch party activities.
Yeah, no, that was actually a really great response because something I've been really interested in recently. I've been more active on TikTok, which a couple years ago, I'm just like, I kind of felt old. I was like, oh, I'm too old for TikTok to learn how it works, and now I'm in the thick of it. I'm watching it all the time, and you just hear these stories of people who lose their jobs over their social media or really come under heat for personal opinions that they share on their personal accounts, and it always gets me to thinking about, like, in terms of personal life and your job life, I still think there should be a line where it's like, I should be able to say this, to my limited number of people on Facebook. And my job shouldn't be able to, I mean, depending where you live, they can fire you if they want, but it shouldn't matter. Like, if I work for Taco Bell and I'm like, KFC is way better, Taco Bell's got nothing. If that's on my personal account, it shouldn't matter. So that was a great response. I really appreciate the thought you put into that. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would add to maybe on this front because I've got more than 10 years of management and leadership experience, including roles in human resources, which obviously is more public facing, a lot of
Mhm.
community and organizational public speaking. Um, and I understand that position, and I agree with it to a large extent. What I would say changes is once you move into a leadership role in your organization. So in my opinion, it should be a little bit different if you're an individual contributor
Mhm.
for a company that you're working for versus a manager or especially an executive. As an individual contributor, as long as you're not actively denigrating your organization, as long as you're not like literally talking bad about your company, if you are expressing, a personal position on things, I think generally speaking, I agree that should be your personal life. Once you become a leader, though, at any level, and especially at an executive level,
Mm,
you don't have the luxury of taking that role off just because you're on your personal time. And
true.
I think I think a lot of people get into trouble, especially inexperienced managers and leaders, because they have that opinion. I want to be able to do so, but just because you want to doesn't mean that you can.
Mhm.
When you accept that responsibility, you are always a leader for the organization, as long as you're employed by them, right? If you get to the point where you say, I have such a strong personal belief on this topic, I'm willing to lose my job or I'll leave the organization and find a different one. Totally up, of course, that's totally up to you as an individual, but you can't not have that responsibility. And what that means is you have to have professional subordination, right? We hear the term insubordination a lot, but being professionally subordinate means I acknowledge that my responsibility to the organization is to, at a minimum, not go in an opposite direction with them publicly, even if I may personally disagree with the specifics of a decision or a strategy or an approach. I'm going to the best of my abilities support that. And if I feel strongly enough that it's the wrong decision, that I'm willing to quit over it, go knock yourself out. That's totally okay. But as a leader, you can disagree, but you can't publicly work in opposition to your organization and still be acting ethically.
No, that makes absolute sense. Oh, wow. That was a heavy note to end Illuvitars on.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I love talking with you, Artemis. I think we always get started on something that's sort of very easygoing and then go super deep and philosophical. But I appreciate your questions.
Well, let's, you kind of already answered this, but I'm gonna kind of re-ask it because 'cause I'll be curious if you say something different. Let's end Illuvitars on something fun
Hmm.
with the two-part question. You've opened a handful of discs. What is your favorite thing that you've pulled? And what is your rarest thing that you've pulled?
Okay. So my favorite is definitely the links. It's the what is the expression? I think is it the happy links or
Oh, is it the Earth?
content?
The Terra Lynx?
Um, no, it's just the standard Lynx portrait, but it's a hollow.
And
Okay.
then the rarest thing that you've pulled.
Yeah, the rarest is definitely, and it's wild. I actually have two empowered dashes.
Mm,
One of them I pulled from a standard disc, though,
wow.
so
I have
that was
not
for
gotten sorry.
yeah, that was for sure the best.
Yeah, I think the best thing I've pulled from a oh, wait, okay, I've lied. I've gotten lucky. I had one, like, crazy moment where I pulled a Goliath from a standard, and
Oh
I
wow,
pulled it back to back. So I pulled a regular Goliath, and then I pulled a smirking Goliath.
nice. I'm on record. I think before Illuvitars dropped, as I thought Goliath was probably the most undervalued of the entire first wave. I think the more we go along, he's going to be super popular. So that was definitely a winning set of polls.
Yeah, I well, see, for me, until today, I was so mad. The thing I've opened a lot of discs.
Hmm.
Um,
You have, for those that have not seen, Artemis is pretty close to top 10 on the
no, no, no.
leaderboard as
I'm
far as
on
I know.
top 10 now.
You are on top 10 now. Congratulations! Awesome.
Yeah, so, I mean, again, the only reason I've really been able to do that is I had my set mount, and I haven't spent more than that. I've just rolled, and I've done some flipping. I'm actually thinking about doing a video series in the last 30 days of the sale of doing a
Okay.
1 cent to 1 ETH challenge
Oh, very
and
cool.
try to,
Yeah.
like, flip my way up. It might fail horribly, but if you're interested, make sure to hit that subscribe button because 'cause it'll be a fun series. But yeah, so I've just been flipping into things, and yeah, I was able to get myself up to the top 10 earlier today because I bought the one Illuvitar that I was missing to have one of each in the set, and that was Geyser.
Oh, okay. Yep.
He like for all of the discs I've opened, he has eluded me.
Mm.
And it's made me so mad. And so today with the leaderboard, I woke up to it. The leaderboard had been live for maybe 4 hours, and I'm like, you know what? I have money from my rollover in my account. I think the floor back then was like around 80, 90 US dollars. I'm like, I'm gonna go get that. It's just then I'll be done. It'll help boost me up because it goes into like so many different slots.
Mhm.
The floor doubled.
Oh, no.
And I went and
Oh.
I looked, and after the announcement, 6 of them were bought up from the floor.
Oh, wow. Okay, everyone else was in the same boat as you.
Seriously,
Eesh.
and yeah, it just seems like actually on a whole, everything has kind of risen up.
Mhm.
The thing I really like about getting the leaderboard out, and especially like at first, I saw the prizes. I'm gonna go on a bit of a rant here. And I saw the first prize weekly, right? These are weekly prizes that can they're gonna be doling out 12 ILV for first place.
Mhm.
And that seemed like a ridiculous amount. And somebody in the Discord mentioned that it's like, well, okay, if you look at it, it's like half of a percent of the in-game rewards that were set aside for the year. Like that's
Mhm.
how much it takes. I'm like, okay. When you also take into consideration that once the safety pool is filled up, um, you know, things can be rolled back in to like
Mhm.
help offset those costs. Um, and it's just like that's a lot. That's really motivating. And this is a great tool to get people to bond things because lately no one wants to use the clown noses.
Mhm.
Or,
Sure.
there's these jokes going around. Froggy's always saying, like, send me your clown nose,
Yeah.
I'll sell it for a penny.
Yeah. That's right.
So it's great to get people to actually start bonding things,
Mhm.
unless you're stubborn like me. Also, it puts a way more importance on background because
Mhm.
the
It does.
change from your standard tier 1 background to a tier 2 can be like 300 points.
Mm.
That on a Illuvitar that goes in, like, 6 different slots, that's 1,200 points right there. So it's I loved it. I got really excited and yeah. It
Yeah.
got me trading again.
Yep. I think that's right, and we as a project and as a community, it's super interesting because most Web3 games that launched over the last 3 years, that was the game structure. It was a gamified, just basically keep rolling in rewards and keep getting people in to pay and to spend. But it was purely from a sort of a yield farming or staking structure or what have you. The key piece that I think a lot of Web3 folks miss is because we saw the negative repercussions of that
Mhm.
when you didn't have a meaningful product behind it. Immediately then people are a little bit concerned. They're like, oh, why are we doing these additional rewards? Why is there a staking structure behind this? And every n- to be fair, no one is wrong in asking those questions, but what we forget is there's value in having those elements. There's value in having prizes and encouraging people through rewards to say, look, if you're going to heavily come in and play, you also have the chance to win something. We've got those prizes that are allocated through the entire token structure. It's been there the whole time since early 2021. And the question is, okay, what percentage of that should we be using now versus in future games? But again, a small percentage here, all of a sudden, as you pointed out, is very motivating to people. And you can take a product that people, as we've seen, are willing to spend money on because we enjoy it. We love the artwork. We love the ability to go out and collect them, to flex on our friends, to go in out there and battle with other people and say, like, I opened my disc and I got more points than you did, even if some of the times you're on the short end of that deal. Um, that's a fun set of mechanics that you can leverage, and then to have rewards on top of that, all of a sudden you have a very compelling argument. And so I think part of this is many of our community members that have been in the sector for so long, we're just innately cautious about anything rewards based or staking. But again, as long as you know the tokenomic structure and you're not building your project off of that, it can be
Mhm.
very effective use of it. Yeah.
But okay, before I take up too much of your time, I wanna go ahead and jump onto the next topic. Illuvitars has been big, but it hasn't been the only thing happening. Unfortunately, I feel like it's probably missed a lot of people's notice on the fact that GovV2 IIP has been voted on, and based off of the votes, it's passed.
Hmm.
So I have to ask, like, now that it's happening, it's here, what are the next steps? What's the timeline looking like?
Hmm. Yeah, so very exciting. Anyone that sort of has been following me for a while knows this was one of my babies for Illuvium, right? I clearly very passionate about this from almost a full year ago now, recognizing that we needed to make some adjustments to our governance structure. But it's going to take a lot of work to get there, both in terms of the design, in terms of community understanding and acceptance, as well as then the development and the implementation on the back end. So having now crossed two of those three hurdles, uh, all we have left is kind of the implementation stage. What is that going to look like? So, first off, there's the actual technical work that's going to need to be done that will allow for the voting structures to be put in place for the different sub councils. So, I think most of your audience is probably going to be aware there will be five councils, four of which we're calling sub councils, and each one of those are going to be comprised of different members. They're going to be elected by the community, by in general, ILV stakers. There will be some additional elements later on that we would intend for the gaming subcouncil. But in general, we've got to have the voting mechanisms in place to do so. We have to have a number of elements in terms of the administrative support. How do we go out and capture feedback for an IAP and make the decision, how are we going to route this? So there's backend elements to be integrated with Discord, with forums, that's going to be necessary. And so the big piece now that has to happen is we have to finish the dev and technical work.
Mhm.
There's a couple options that we have going forward, and I'm not going to really communicate too many details right now. But we've had discussions about, does it make sense, what elements for us to build out ourselves versus what can we find more or less off the shelf or in a way that we could configure or customize it, that would work for us. There's value in having a product that we might build out ourselves that we could then sell to other DAOs.
Mhm.
So in general, and we've got a few different decisions to make, but fundamentally, that's what's the next step: is go out and build the thing, and then move forward with a vote as we go in towards the next epoch.
So regardless of implementation, you still see the voting for the next epoch happening with sub councils.
That is the intent. Yep. And so obviously, again, we've got some building to do between now and then. Um, we're going to be pushing it. So again, we're here at the end of March, and we're just a few months out. However, what I would say is our intention and the team's intention is that we would be pushing towards the next epoch with the governance V2 in place. Now, that might mean that in some of the like tech implementations, we don't have it 100%.
Mhm.
But our firm belief is that I'm going to say an 85-90% finished Gov V2 is still a marked improvement over Gov V1. And so, as long as we can get there in a secure way, it's still going to be the right direction.
Yeah, but going with the elections, a lot of people might not know a recent development in ETH lizards, which is Illuvium, very Illuvium friendly. You were proposed as CEO of ETH lizards, and that is also a proposal over in that Discord that is going through the vetting and the voting process. With that big change in your life, are you expecting to run again for the next epoch? Or are you going to step back? Like, what are your plans personally?
Yeah, it's a very fair question. I had a couple folks actually ask me that as well in ETH Lizards. So at the moment, my feedback is I'm undecided. So for anyone that's curious and has asked, I am intending to be leaving my Web 2 role fully as I step into the CEO of ETH Lizards function. Again, as you mentioned, this is all subject to community acceptance and past LIP. Um, that said, if I'm able to drop my Web 2 commitments and my current full time job, I actually have a lot more capacity, both for ETH Lizards and then for Illuvium and other projects that I might be supporting. So we'll have to see. I've had some discussions with the current council members, some other advisors, and trusted colleagues in terms of a sort of divided loyalty. Here, I feel very comfortable that we've got a very large group of counselors in GovV2 that would be there. Any situations where I would potentially have a conflict of interest, of course, I'm going to recuse myself. This is just a base professionalism that you would need. But one of my key platforms when I ran for this epoch was I'm very connected across the entire industry, have a lot of visibility on other projects, the ecosystem, and what's being built out. And I believe that I'll have even more as the CEO of ETH Lizards, given that a large portion of our approach is working with partner projects across the
Mhm.
gaming sector. And so I still think that I'll be able to offer probably even more of value in terms of knowledge, networking, and relationships in the space. The question, though, that I have to wrestle with is, would I have the capacity and sort of the mental energy to be able to devote myself enough to Illuvium to make that work? So again, I haven't decided yet. Thankfully, there's a little bit more time before I would have to, and so my hope is that I'll have a better feel in terms of my capacity and time commitments before I make that choice. But either way, I have to say, running and serving as a counselor for Illuvium this epoch has been truly fantastic. We've had a lot of great successes, and I know you've been there, along with a lot of the community to see, participate, and be a part of what I think at the end we're going to look back on as a critical, maybe the most critical epoch in the past 2 or 3 years, and really one that helps set us up for a very sustainable foundation moving forward.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, after the last, I guess how the last elections went down and all the concerns that were brought up, like, I am pleasantly surprised and blown away by the progress and the kinda go-getter attitude that everyone on the council has brought this epoch, and it's so different from, I mean, I haven't been around for all of them, but 2? The last 2 or 3 I've been a part of, like, just props. And honestly, I hope to see you back because I think
Thank
there's
you.
nothing better to see on our council and sub-councils than people who are involved in multiple different communities, people who hold leadership in multiple different communities. It can only be a good thing, especially as we move forward to partner with these other communities.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the elements that maybe aren't quite as visible to the Illuvium community, um, the work and the output that you've seen in terms of finished IAPs, votes, community engagement, it's really only a fraction of what's going on behind the scenes. And so, what I would say is, even if there are elements that haven't been made fully visible yet, many of those might be contingency plans for activities that we haven't needed. Right. So one of the topics that I think most people that are watching this are gonna remember, just a few weeks ago we had USDC, the coin depeg, and for those that aren't familiar, Illuvium, much of our treasury, the vast majority of it, was in USDC. And so the question, what are we doing about that from a community perspective, probably looked like there wasn't a whole lot of activity because we didn't really make major changes at that time. But I can assure you, over that 72-hour period, 96-hour period, um, there was constant evaluation of what's the status, what are we hearing, what are we seeing from, again, other well-connected individuals within Web3, what contingencies do we need to have in place. And so even if elements like that may look like there's not a whole lot happening publicly, there's a lot of work that's being put in to make sure that we are setting up the right structure for the DAO in terms of security, in terms of your future long term structure. You've seen GovV2. There's,
Mhm.
in my opinion, almost as much work that's been put in on some of the back end activities for the organization long term. And so again, some of that's going to be visible in the maybe midterm, longer term. But those are the types of elements that I think are really essential to have, whether it's myself or others, but to have people that do know what's going on in the industry and are connected. But they have to be active, right? They have to be active in Illuvium, not just knowledgeable, but you have to apply that knowledge into
Mhm.
what are we doing as a project to make sure it's working.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of the next epoch, next election, it's going to sneak up on us because I believe the election is going to happen sometime in June, which means we're going to go through this whole election nomination campaigning period the month before in May, if it's only that month. I've talked a little bit thinking that, like, oh, we should have more time if we're going to have twice as many people because there's a lot of people to interview and kind of try to get out in the spotlight so the community could get to know them better beforehand.
Mhm.
And now having possibly 2 to 3 times as many people. For anyone who's watching this and maybe thinking that they want to get involved in government, is there any little tidbits, bit of wisdom, a rundown of what they can expect. Because I know for a lot of people, what actually happens behind the scene in governance is a mystery.
Mhm. Yeah, so I'm gonna answer in two parts. One is sort of the decision and the, we'll call it campaigning part, but everything on the front end. So my advice to anyone who's thinking about it, uh, do right. If you believe that you have a lot to contribute to the organization, we have set up the framework in a way that almost everyone that's here would be maybe not fully qualified, but would at least have value to contribute in one of the sub councils, right? And so, if you're interested, if you're um, willing to basically devote a fair bit of your time to actually supporting Illuvium, you are fully on board with the vision and the long term promise of the project. Um, Run. The worst that can happen is you don't get elected and you feel like, well, it wasn't meant to be at this point in time. But having worked with on the council now, council members like Scoriax, for instance, that have run before, that didn't get voted on as a councilor the first time. They learned a lot from that first run, and I think it's helped prepare them to be better counselors now, because what they saw, they were more actively engaged in the process. Someone like yourself, someone like our other community members that I've engaged very actively with, that finished in the top, the top 10, top 7, 8, 10 in the last cycle, that weren't in the top 5, have been incredibly valuable for us. Highly motivated and active. Those are the individuals that, again, definitely need to run. If you haven't run in the past, though, there's nothing that says you can't win the first time you run, right? I was in that boat during this epoch where I had not run before. Certainly, I had supported Illuvium in a number of ways, but not in a formal council position. So, my advice to anyone who's thinking about it: absolutely, if it's something you're willing to devote the time to, and give it the responsibility that it deserves, you should consider running. In terms of the actual sort of administration and council operations, the number one piece of advice I can give is you have to recognize that while you were elected to provide value that only you could, your insight, your knowledge and experience, your vision for the project, you have to recognize that you are a part of a team. And a council does not function best when it's a group of knowledgeable individuals. It functions best when it's a group of knowledgeable individuals who are working together, playing to each other's strengths. And so, as you mentioned, Artemis, this rotation, Kieran, Daraji, Blichter, Skoriax, all of them are bringing very different elements than I bring, and the same for me. I bring elements that they can't, and understanding where we are each able to contribute the most, but also challenging each other, asking tough questions when someone comes up with a new idea. That's the way that you need to be operating and thinking about it as a council. Again, it's not a board of directors for a corporation, but you should be thinking about yourself as a collective as opposed to a bunch of individuals that are just voting on IAPs as they come forward.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That's actually all the questions I have for today. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say to the folks watching?
Um, I just want to say again, thank you to everyone. Our Illuvium community is really fantastic, right? We have uh, the most passionate and engaged gamers, investors, content creators that you're going to find. And so I wouldn't be here without all of you. So thank you. And looking forward to what's shaping up to be an amazing last third here of this epoch. So thank you so much, Artemis. You're amazing. Appreciate all your content as well.
Oh, thank you. And for anyone watching, if you want to stay up with the latest in Illuvium governance, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Down below in the description, you will find links to my latest newsletter concerning everything that's happened in this last month. And Annie, thanks again for joining us. Until next time, we'll see you on the flip side.